Radio Row in Indianapolis. It's Combine time as teams look for their next superstar. Some of the biggest names in sports and entertainment will be right here. Get ready for the 2024 draft, baby. It's the Jake Asman Show.
Day 2 of our coverage from Indianapolis here at the NFL Scouting Combine. And joining me right now is New York Jets beat reporter for The Athletic, Zack Rosenblatt. Zack, welcome aboard.
Thanks, man. How you doing?
How many combines is this for you now?
Oh, I think this is technically my 6th, but 7th year because there was the one year that there was none. Yeah, a lot of combines, a lot of time spent at like steakhouses and dive bars in Indianapolis at night, just running into NFL people.
From your perspective, is this where a lot of your sources kind of get built up over the years? You get a chance to kind of connect with maybe some new people, some old people as well?
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. I a lot of times I do a lot of my work like during the season, even like when I'm working, stories and stuff like that. But yeah, this is definitely a place where you put faces to names and you meet a lot of people that you've spoken to before, and then you grab a beer with them and stuff like that. Yeah.
Obviously, your story in The Athletic was like the biggest moment, I would say, so far in the Jets offseason. What has it been like walking around here? Have people come up to you and been asking you about that nonstop?
A little bit, yeah. Especially, other reporters, I would say. I haven't really heard as much from like NFL people yet. But yeah, I think it's kind of quieted down a little bit. I mean, Mecole Hardman, as we're going to talk about, he's kind of like taken over the conversation with some similar things that I wrote about, some other stuff that was interesting. But yeah, it's been interesting. Because we published it at a time when we weren't going to see anybody. It wasn't on purpose, but it just kind of like timed out to where we published it, and then we weren't going to see Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh for like a little bit. So this is going to be our first time talking to Joe Douglas since the story came out, since the Mecole thing, since all the drama. But
I know, like, obviously, you go to the Jets with a story like that, you give them a chance to comment publicly. But privately, has anyone reached out to you to push back on anything you wrote, or has you just letting the story stand on itself with Diana?
Yeah, I mean, not only have they not reached out to push back on anything, it's actually been the opposite. I think it's been we don't really have anything to be mad about because it's all true. So, yeah, we haven't really had pushback. Like, I haven't really, again, I haven't interacted that much because the last couple of weeks is kind of like a very dead period for like everybody. Even the coaches, like, were off for a bit and stuff like that. So I think if I was ever going to hear anything, it'd be in the coming weeks probably. But I don't anticipate any pushback. I don't anticipate any ill will. Like, maybe Robert Saleh is not my biggest fan right now. I would guess, but yeah, I'm not too worried about that.
What's your takeaway on Saleh now going into year 4? I know in the story you covered a lot of what went down this year, what was going on behind the scenes, but now kind of going forward, looking at Robert Saleh, like, what are your thoughts on him as a head coach going forward?
I mean, I should say, I hope he takes the right lessons from like everything that went wrong last year. And I think he is. I think he's reflecting. And so I think there's a lot that, he's on the hottest of hot seats right now. Everybody knows that. I think if you I haven't seen like the betting odds or whatever, I would guess he's near the top of like most likely to be fired or whatever. But this is a good roster. I've been saying that all off season since last season. Like, this is a really talented roster. They obviously need to fix the O-line, get another receiver, all that crap, but they have legit talent. And if Robert can keep it together, and if he can figure out how to fix the offense, even with Nathaniel Hackett as his offensive coordinator, like, these are all the things that are going to decide if he's going to keep being the head coach of the Jets and what like his future is in the, like, if it doesn't work out with the Jets, like, and it can't be as dysfunctional as it was last year. Like, if he wants to get another job too. So I'm very curious to see how he responds to all the adversity from last year that I don't think they responded to. Even Joe Douglas, if you remember at the end of season press conference, like, one of his first statements was like, I don't like that we've been defined by not being able to overcome adversity over the last couple of years. And so that's partially a reflection on the head coach. So if they come back out and, something terrible will happen, it always does, whether it's Aaron Rodgers getting hurt or somebody else, like, they need to respond better. And so I think that's going to fall on Robert Saleh, and fixing the offense is ultimately what's going to come down to. And, Nathaniel Hackett's back as offensive coordinator as of now, and I think that will stay the case. So if the offense doesn't fix, then he's going to have 4 years where he never figured out his offense.
When it came to the story, I thought one of the interesting takeaways that you guys had in there was they were apparently actively trying to hire a senior level assistant to, I don't want to say, take away responsibility from Hackett, but basically help him out and add another voice to that room. We saw Rob Calabrese leave. So right now you still have Todd Downing. You still have obviously Keith Carter, and you have Nathaniel Hackett. Is there any update in regards to who the Jets are potentially looking to add? Are they still looking to add someone to that offensive coaching staff?
Yeah, it's been pretty quiet on that front. I do find it interesting that the Jets haven't announced any of their like coaching changes, and sometimes teams don't. But I do wonder if they're still in the process of working through that, because I know at least one guy that they were pursuing, and I can't say who, but he got a job somewhere else. And so I don't know if they're having trouble getting somebody to agree to come here. I mean, it's kind of like last year when Saleh was initially having trouble finding an offensive coordinator. Like if you're going to a situation where you're worried it might be 1 year, then why would you take the job when you could look elsewhere, kind of thing. So that might be a roadblock they're running into. But I do wonder what the structure of the play calling looks like, because again, like everybody who's watches and listens, like something needs to get fixed. It was a mess. They looked unprepared a lot of the weeks, and that falls a lot on Hackett and Saleh. So I know Woody Johnson had those comments a few weeks back where he said Robert's going to get more involved in the offense. I think that's really the right move. I think you can trust Jeff Ulbrich and Brent Boyer to do their jobs on their sides of the ball. And I don't think Hackett's shown that you can really trust him to do it on his own. So I'm curious to see if maybe that role doesn't, materialize anybody notable, and it just Robert Saleh takes on that role, or they find somebody that we don't know about that's like they've kind of been hiding.
What do you think it means when Woody Johnson did come out and say Robert's going to be more involved with the offense? And what specifically does that look like from what you've heard and maybe what you could kind of put together off those comments?
Yeah, I guess we haven't talked to Robert and we haven't talked to Joe Douglas, but mainly Robert, to ask about that. Like with Woody, you never know if it was like a slip of the tongue, or if he meant it like actually like that, or if it was just him, whatever, or if that's actually like a conversation they're having, which I think is very possible. And what that looks like, I think he just becomes more hands-on, because I think Robert's big thing was always handing the keys to each of the coordinators, letting them run the show, and kind of just like, you do your thing and I'm going to like chime in the big moments, and we're going to talk about strategy during the week and stuff like that. I think he probably needed to give more pushback to some stuff Hackett was doing or not doing. Having Rodgers back is obviously a big part of that. Like, I mean, Rodgers is really the offensive coordinator when he's in there. And again, I'm sure we're going to get to the Hardman. It's hard not to allude to it because it just happened. Like when he goes down, they said, Aaron, it's all Aaron, go all on Aaron, let Aaron do his thing. Aaron goes down. They don't have a backup plan. Nobody knows what to do. So I think that's the area where Robert needs to step in and maybe, put his hands on the reins a little more.
Let's talk about those Hardman comments that you alluded to. So a couple clips here. We'll start with him specifically talking about Aaron Rodgers going down. This was Mecole Hardman on the Pivot podcast, which was released yesterday.
4 plays later, that was a different stadium.
It was over with.
When you're sitting on the sideline and you see it happen, what was your reaction to that?
Oh, shit. It's going to be a long day, boy. Because you got to understand, people understand, Aaron is the offense, bro. Like, his thought process and his ability to get to anything that he wants to is scary. There's no bad play with Aaron. Like, I'm telling you, like, run deep, you run down the middle, you stop right here, and you run this slant. He has the ability to Madden, hot routes. He has that ability. Like, he has that ability. It's like, and he's so smart with defenses. Like in practice, the man be like, yeah, he's blitzing. Hey, you back up, you're not coming. It's like, how do you know he's not blitzing, bro? Like, you don't know that. You know what I'm saying? And like his mind is like fantastic. And then people trying to compare him and Pat. But I be like, man, listen, as far as like the experience wise, like kind of like I guess like Tom Brady, like he can read defenses. And like Aaron, to the point he read him and he know like, hey, he's blitzing. I want you to run a slant right here. I'm gonna throw the ball to you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like that in itself makes the offense so dangerous. But when a guy like that leaves the offense and it's like more so it's conceptual, like okay, now just make the throws, it get harder for the offense. Mm-hmm. And then you put a lot of pressure on Zack Wilson to try to carry put into that role rather than making the offense where he's at his best. They didn't do that. You know what I mean? Cause I've been in a situation where Pat get hurt and we had Chad Henne in there or what was it, Moore?
Yeah.
And Coach Reed just made the offense where it solidified them and we won games. We went 4-1 when Pat was out. You know what I mean? And with Chad, that we won a playoff game.
Yeah. Finished the playoff game with Cleveland, right?
Beat the fuck out of my team.
Browns.
Yeah.
No, the Jags.
That was the Browns we beat.
They beat the Browns.
You beat the Jags. Well, not in the playoffs.
Yeah, he got hurt last year against the Jags going into halftime.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So we'll start with that. With those comments about the offense and Rodgers. Zach, what did you make of that from Hardman?
Yeah, I mean, all his points are like he's spot on with all that stuff. I mean, Rodgers is amazing with what he can do at the line of scrimmage and the things like that. It's why I've always said that it's more Rodgers' offense. He's the offensive coordinator, and Hackett is kind of his assistant. And I mean, you saw that when he goes down, and Zach Wilson doesn't have the same processing capabilities, the ability to improvise and see what he sees and tell a guy to what, like Mecole was saying, like you go there, you go there, you go there. Like there's very few quarterbacks that can do that. And so you saw the drop off, and while it is absolutely like a fair excuse that you lose Rodgers and go to Zach Wilson and things are going to fall apart, but they just like never adjusted.
It happened in week 1.
Yeah, that's always been. I mean, everybody knows it. Like it was obvious, and then I think my story shed some light on like the way they threw their hands up, like they actually did. Like they're just like, what do you want us to do? But that's not as. I mean, the Browns are a great example, obviously, and I'm sure everybody alludes to them, and I get it because they lose Deshaun Watson and they don't throw their hands up. They figure it out. Like that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, you had this great defense that's shutting teams down most weeks, and Hackett is just not adjusting. And so I think Hardman's comments about that stuff is like just definitely spot on. And I think a lot of people share the same feelings in that building.
Now, on the other hand, when I hear that, I go, okay, well, in theory, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy next year with a chip on his shoulder and the offensive line goes from awful to, let's just say it's mediocre, they get some injury luck, like I actually think there's a path for the Jets to be a pretty good team, at least in the regular season. So I guess my frustration as a fan, it's like, last year was an unmitigated disaster. It was a nightmare to live through and talk about it every day. But I almost feel like the Jets get covered sometimes like they're the 2-15 Panthers. And it's like this team did win 7 games. They have an elite defense. They have an elite special teams unit, assuming they bring back both Morstead and Greg DeLeg. I don't know, but you tell me Aaron Rodgers plays 15 of 17 games next year. I think there's a path for the Jets to be a pretty good team.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you for sure. I think a lot of that is relative to like expectations and the conversations that, they were talking about themselves like they were a Super Bowl team.
Sure.
And if you're a Super Bowl team and you lose one player and it all falls apart, like then there's something wrong. And they did go 7-10, and your record is your record. But also if the Washington game, they almost blew that one against a bad Washington team. The Giants game they won when the Giants had like negative passing yards. Obviously, you could do the flip side too, where there's some games they should have won.
You could start
the
to
Chiefs game,
against
stuff
Atlanta,
like that.
you might actually win that
so
one
you
instead
kind
of
of like
playoff.
evens out in the end. Like I don't think they were as close to the playoffs as maybe 7-10 would indicate, but maybe they're not as far away as like it feels based on the way they're being covered, like you said. So like a lot of times it does come down to the quarterback. They're fixing the offensive line, like you said, if they can even get it to average to below average, they'd be a lot better. But you're going into the season and nobody knows what Rodgers is going to either look like or if he's going to be able to make it through the season. Ultimately, he's coming off an Achilles and he's 40 years old. So there's a lot of questions there, but you're right. I mean, I think this team has the ability to be really good, but the Jets need to prove they could do that. Like they have not done that in 13 years.
Yeah.
So.
And the head coach, or the best thing I could say about him as a Jet fan, it's incomplete. I mean, I can't say Robert Saleh was a good coach. I don't want to sit here and say he's terrible and he can't get better. I mean, Todd Bowles clearly has improved as a head coach. I mean, from your reporting, though, on Saleh, you said something I thought interesting at the beginning of this conversation. You think he's taking this year to heart and he's making improvements, adjustments. Can you maybe shed more light on that, what you've heard?
I should say I hope he is more than I know, like for certain. I've heard that I think our story and just like in general, everything that went down, I think he has been reflective and thinking about it. I don't know what's that meant in terms of like enacting change. I mean, you've seen him make some coaching staff changes, Embry, Azani, Calabrese, all gone, pretty much pushed out the door, and it brought in some new guys, new voices, potentially another new voice like we talked about. So I think a lot of that is just, I don't know. I hope that when things go wrong, he doesn't throw his hands up again and handle it the way he did last year, where it was like the excuse making was pervasive in that building, and it started at the top with him. And it as Mecole alluded to, I think in one of the quotes, like it was the defense was being led fine. Like everything was going. Nobody was even pointing fingers. The defense wasn't even coming at the offense. Like you didn't hear. Like they didn't turn on each other, and Saleh deserves credit for the fact that the locker room still stayed together with everything happening, just like the year before with everything happening. But like the offense was an absolute disaster. There's excuses everywhere. Hackett, him, and the excuses have to stop. I think it starts there ultimately. Like when things are wrong as a head coach, it's your job to figure it out and not make. Even if the excuses are accurate, don't say them. Like just keep it to yourself.
Yeah, let us say it for you.
Like we don't. You're an NFL coach. You're an NFL team. Like you have a job to do, and I get. Like the circumstances are out of your control sometimes, but I think they just need to handle the adversity better.
Let's hear more from Hardman. So this is the money clip that was going viral where he attacked Hackett and ripped the Jet organization as well. So here's Mecole Hardman once again on the Pivot podcast.
What went wrong with the Jets? They trade you. What went wrong there?
Y'all treat certain guys that shouldn't be treated like they should be treated. And I just feel like it's not an established coaching staff there as well. Like, you just got a new coaching staff that came in. It's no standard there. It's like everybody do what they want to do. And defense have a more of a stabilized standard with the coaching staff on that side. So you could tell the defense got a standard, but the offense is just like, all right, we've just figured it out. It's Aaron's show. Let Aaron do what Aaron do, you know what I mean? But then when Aaron go down, it's like, we don't know what to do. But this is that same coach staff that just was out of a job the previous year, then average get a new job. I know for a fact I'm better than him for sure. Like, I ain't trying to, I know I'm better than him. I'm better than him too. Garrett Wilson, the only person y'all should just be like, hey. So I have no problem with y'all putting around Garrett Wilson for sure. I don't care. Like, that's fine. But when you come to certain other things, it's like, come on, like, I don't understand why I'm not in the rotation with that. And y'all never gave me a reason as to why either. This my thing was, y'all can't tell me about winning. I've been to 4 Super Bowls in 5 years, you know what I'm saying, now, you feel me? But beforehand, I've been to 4 AFC championships, I've been to 3 Super Bowls, I've won 2 of them. Like, I know what winning looks like.
Right.
I know what winning is. So y'all keep telling me certain things, it's like, I'm not going for that. Like, because y'all not doing it right. Like, we got hammers on the ground, we don't got no discipline, people feel like it's too many individual egos in this locker room or whatever, and I'm telling them, I'm like, that's not going to get y'all to win. It's not going to happen.
So I hear those comments, and to me, I'm just like, come on, man. Well, sour grapes. Like, you and I were talking about this a little bit off air. You could rip the Jets for a lot of things, but getting rid of Mecole Hardman, who got outplayed by Xavier Gibson, and then we learn in this interview that the Jets asked him to return punts the night of that Chiefs game, and he was complaining of a pinky injury, and he wouldn't do it. He basically quit on the team. He also admitted in this interview, after Aaron went down, he all but checked out. He also said he was telling Patrick Mahomes and Brent Veach, the GM of the Chiefs, to come get him, which, if true, is tampering, by the way. So, I don't know. Mecole Hardman had 15 catches all year. Sure, he caught the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl, but, I mean, he didn't do anything for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he also almost lost them the game against the Bills when he fumbled out of the end zone. So he's not wrong about Hackett, but he also is kind of coming across like a bit of a nozzle with those comments there. And I don't know, as a Jet fan, that just irked me.
Yeah. Look, like, you can both acknowledge that, like, the stuff he said is, like, both concerning and, like, accurate, some of it. And at the same time, like, it's obviously sour grapes. I mean, this is a guy that, he admitted he checked out, like, which is a wild thing to admit, because you're not getting the ball enough or you're not playing enough, like, things like that. And he was clashing with coaches from what I understand. Like, he did not get along with them. I think he got along with some of his teammates, not as much with others. And it just felt to me like it was a loss all around. And I don't think they got what they thought they were getting. When the Jets signed him, they were very excited. They thought they were going to be able to at first pair him with Elijah Moore before they traded Elijah. And then they thought he would replace Elijah Moore, and he would also be like a souped up version of Braxton Berrios. And they couldn't figure out how to use him, which is on them. And he also, maybe the effort wasn't entirely there, and that's on him. And it just was a marriage that obviously didn't work out. And like we were talking about, like, I thought it was, like, funny that he was all people was the one that caught the game-winning touchdown at the end, just like a Jet. Like, that made me laugh. But also, I don't think it's like a reflection on all the Jets' problems. The Jets have a lot of other issues. The fact that they didn't get Mecole Hardman right ultimately is not that big of a deal. Yeah. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. It's louder now because he had the very last play in the Super Bowl. So that's the last play everybody's going to remember now for all offseason. And he's a former Jet. So when he does all these interviews, everybody's like, man, the Jets gave up on you, huh? And then he's going to say all these quotes, and it's going to keep coming out. And now Joe Douglas will get asked about this stuff, and the cycle will just keep going because he caught the touchdown in the end. And that's kind of what happens when you're a Jets fan. You get tortured by, like, former Jets doing stuff, and then you have to hear about it all offseason. And that's why Jets fans got all mad when some of the Jets tweeted. I tweeted a joke about it. Like, I shouldn't have probably, but I just found it funny. But anyway, like,
he wasn't good in Kansas City is the frustrating aspect. It's like people who didn't follow.
So if you want to criticize the Jets for anything, it's that the Chiefs figured out how to use him. He wasn't like a star receiver for them or everything, but they found a way to, like, put him in there and make plays with them. The Jets couldn't even do that. Yeah. So that's where, if you want to criticize them, that's true. But Hackett wasn't doing that with anybody. He couldn't figure out how to use anybody on the team. So he didn't know Bryce Hager could catch the ball until week 9. So
don't get me started with that quote.
Yeah. So I like, again, like, the quotes are fascinating and a lot of them are accurate and, worth talking about. And the campering thing is wild that if that's accurate, like, that he would say that.
Would the Jets try and go to the NFL?
That's what I'm curious. I mean, I'm sure Joe Douglas will be asked about that today. I thought about the Eagles Cardinals situation last year where they just kind of like agreed to like a pick swap or the Eagles got a better pick. Like maybe it's something like that. I don't know. We'll find out because you don't hear about in-season tampering very often, like with a player in a team like that. So it's going to be, I'm sure Patrick Mahomes and him are allowed to talk, but if he actually talked to Brett Veach, like he said, like that's concerning for sure.
100%. And one of his reasons for bashing the Jets was that he said that he refused to return punts versus Kansas City because he felt special teams coordinator Brant Boyer had misled him about the punt returning job in camp, and that he didn't have enough time to prepare when asked on the night of the Chiefs game to step in for Xavier Gibson, who had tweaked his ankle a few days earlier. Hardman said he was dealing with his own injury, a hyperextended pinky that made it tough to catch. He said Saleh tried to convince him to do it, but Hardman said he told him, "I'm not catching for that man," referring to Brant Boyer. The one thing I could say about the Jets, and they have a lot of issues, we know this, Brant Boyer is highly respected as an outstanding special teams coach. So when you tell me you're quitting on that guy who has survived how many different head coaches because he's good at this job, that tells me all I need to know about Mecole Hardman.
I mean, I think Mecole has a vision of himself that he's like a star player, and when he's not treated that way, he reacted the way he did. I think you saw that with Elijah Moore in a different way when he was there. Like he thought he was the best receiver on the team. Garrett Wilson was actually the best receiver. I mean, Mecole admitted that Garrett's better than him, but so it just feels like sour grapes. He thought he was going to get there. He was going to play with Aaron Rodgers. He was going to get the ball a lot. He was going to be the returner. And then, when he didn't get what he wanted, he kind of threw his arms up and started pouting. And so I think it reflects poorly on Mecole. I don't think it reflects poorly on Brant Boyer because you wouldn't hear anybody else say a bad thing about him in that building. Brant, stands on the table for players more than anybody on that coaching staff. Like he fought for them to get Xavier Gibson. He worked him out himself. He fought for them to bring back Justin Hardy. He's as much an advocate for those players as anybody in that building. So the idea that he didn't want to play because of Brant, he's not playing for Brant Boyer like that seems wild to me. So
if you have a question for Zack Rosenblatt, write it in. We'll do a little Q&A before we wrap up here. Shout out to all the Jet fans watching. Super Chats cut the line where an angry Jet fan named Bang Mateo says, "You are finally seeing the light on Saleh. Told you." I mean, this fan base is incredibly down right now. Yeah. I do wonder if the vibes could be restored with some moves and Rodgers actually being out there. Just your thoughts on just kind of the state of the Jet fan right now, because I mean, the hype was as high as it had been since 2010. And it just came crashing down this season.
I mean, think about this time last year, we didn't even really know that the Aaron Rodgers was like a real possibility. There was like some rumblings about it, but it's going to be interesting because it's kind of like, it's like a little different, but it's kind of like the Adam Gase thing where it's so everybody's so mad and cautious and angry right now that if they start off poorly, like it could get ugly. So I think starting, like, it's obvious thing to say you need to start off fast, but like this team more than I haven't covered the Jets for that long, but more than most Jets team in recent memory, if they start off poorly with Aaron Rodgers, like if they're 0-3 or 1-3 or something like that, like it's gonna get loud, it's gonna get ugly, and then it's gonna be interesting to see how Robert handles it. But if they can come out hot, he might not get all the goodwill back, but if they can look like a team that every week is competing and grinding and I'm not to say they gave up last year, but the offense is getting better, like then Saleh's reputation will get built up again. Because not even just in New York, like I think around the league, his reputation has taken a huge hit. He's kind of an easy target right now. So he's not here in Indy, and you see a lot of national people like criticizing him for it when he actually hasn't been here at all in his career. And that's like a lot of a trend that's kind of happening right now. Like I said earlier with the Mecole thing, you can criticize the Jets, you can criticize Saleh for a lot. I don't think him not being here is as big of a deal as it was being made to be. But yeah, he has a lot of ground to make up with this fan base. Like he's pretty, like, his approval rating is as low as it's ever been.
100%. Now, I wonder this, Zach, you bring up getting off to a good start. Woody Johnson, since he's owned the team, has never made an in-season coach change. If they start 1-3 and you have Jeff Ulbrich there and you have Ron Middleton, could we see the Jets actually do something they've never done under the Johnson regime, fire a coach in season?
Yeah, I've been talking to people about that this week because that's like a very interesting part of this to me because I didn't know that until like honestly recently that they'd never fired a coach in season, which is crazy to think about as like the New York Jets because they've had some seasons where they probably should have. I don't know. I think it depends on the level. Like if they're at the midway point of the season and they're 2-8 or whatever it is, or like at the bye, whatever their bye is, like maybe, or they're 0-4 and the losses are blowouts, like something like that. Like I don't know. Because this is a very unique situation because they feel like they have a Super Bowl caliber team. And if they think firing the coach could give them a boost like the Raiders with last year with Antonio Pierce, you have a guy in Ulbrich, beloved, Ron Middleton, you mentioned, Brant Boyer, I think would be an option hypothetically, just to play out the hypothetical. But I'm always of the mind that like until you see something happen that's never happened before, it's kind of hard to like predict that it will. So I'll believe it when I see it, kind of thing. Like I don't think that'll happen. I don't think it'll be so bad that they have to fire him, but you never know with this team. So we'll see.
Do you think it'd be Ulbrich as the interim, or would it be Middleton or Boyer?
I lean towards Ulbrich or Boyer.
Ulbrich being the head coach of the Senior Bowl, I think is significant in regards to
well,
that.
and again, like nobody's going to say a bad thing about Ulbrich in that building. The players love him. Offensive players respect him. Rodgers likes him. Same thing with Boyer, and he's been there. He's been there through 3 head coaches, which is why like I do wonder if he would be the option. But I mean, I think Ulbrich's going to be a really good head coach ultimately, and it would be cool if he got the opportunity. But again, not at the expense. You don't want it to happen because in this scenario, everything's going terribly. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's a hypothetical, but I would lean towards Ulbrich probably.
Now, Ulbrich had been linked to the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator job. It feels like it's more speculation at this point than like, oh, he's going to go interview and the Jets are going to grant him permission. If Kyle Shanahan did want to try and hire Jeff Ulbrich, would Saleh block that?
So I have heard those rumblings, and there's been those rumblings like around the league, I would say. But from my understanding, the 49ers have not officially requested anything. So whether that means they've talked about it or they like broached the top. I mean, Robert and Kyle Shanahan are buddies. So it's possibly had a conversation. Robert's like, I'm not doing that. I'm not letting that happen.
Why would Saleh in an all-in year allow his highly respected DC to leave the building?
100%. That's the thing. Like, there's no logical reason you could come up with.
Unless there's like clashing behind the scenes?
No, there's no clashing. I think they get along fine. If there's something personal or like a family matter. You know, you think about it, Jeff's from San Francisco. His kids were born there. He played there for so long. Like, so if there was something going on with him, maybe. But that would be such a bad look right now, especially because as we're talking about, like he's maybe the only coach that's beloved by everybody outside of the building, not only inside the building.
Right. Which is kind of ironic because at the beginning of his tenure, fans.
I know it is funny how that works. Like things change so fast. And if they had a bad defense this year, they'd probably turn on him again. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but I've definitely heard that noise.
Question from Shake and Bake, who wants to know, Zach, any chance Joe Douglas signs Marquez Valdez-Scantling? He just got released.
Any chance? I'd say yes. I'd say, I mean, hopefully not as the number 2 receiver. So either, I think they need to sign 2 receivers or bring in 2 new receivers. So maybe he'd be an option as like the cheap third, or if they strike out on everybody, you sign him, Rodgers trusts him, and then you maybe go and draft somebody like that. I could see. But if like you're relying on him like they did like Randall Cobb last year, you're in trouble. I mean, he played a lot for the Chiefs. We were talking about he played a lot for the Chiefs this year, and he did nothing numbers wise. He had like a touchdown, I think, in the playoffs. That was pretty good.
Did that one long catch in the AFC title game,
and that's what he is. He's like a deep threat who will occasionally make a big play. And Rodgers knows how to play with him. He also gets a lot of drops, by the way. I don't know if he'd be beloved by Jets fans, and I don't think they would celebrate that signing. But you can't rule it out. He's a Rodgers buddy, so.
Cap on X writes in, is someone going to ask Joe Douglas today about the leaks and the fact that he was labeled assistant GM by someone?
I don't know. It's a good question. I am curious if that gets asked. I probably won't ask it, but yeah, I mean, I think he knows that's the reputation right now. I mean, you look at all the moves they did last offseason. Most of
Rodgers
them were,
guys.
Rodgers guys, none of them worked out. I think.
Is that going to be different this offseason?
I do think it's not going to be, we're just going to get whoever Aaron wants. I think Aaron will be involved in like the conversations like, hey, I'm thinking about pursuing this guy. Like, do you have any insight on him? Would you like to play with him? That kind of thing. I don't think it's going to be like Aaron saying.
Which is smart, by the way. I have no issue
that's the right way. And that's normal, by the way. Like, teams do that with star quarterbacks all the time. Like,
we're just not used to that as Jet fans. That's
yeah. But it was like a different level with him last year. So he's like, I want these guys. They went and overpaid all of them. So if he's like, if he goes to them and like, I need you to sign David Bakhtiari, they're not going to be like, well, we're not just going to do that. If it works financially, it makes sense, we'll do it, kind of thing. And that's how they need to approach it. They need to be more discerning. They need to be more, not just what Aaron wants. They need to do what's best for the team, for the current, present, and the future. And they have obvious needs. I mean, Rodgers is going to support them signing a bunch of offensive linemen. He's going to support them getting a better second receiver. It's just a matter of like, are they going to go for his friends, or are they just going to get the best options?
Joey wants to know, Zach, do you think the Jets will ultimately make the playoffs with Saleh at the helm?
It's so hard to say. And again, it's kind of what I go back to earlier. Like, until I see something happen, like, it's hard for me to, like, I was convinced they were going to go on a run last year. Like, I thought they had the pieces. Disaster happened.
Before the season or
before the season. Yeah. And then after they beat the Eagles, I was like, I wonder if they can actually like sneak into the playoffs. Like,
that's what's so disappointing. It felt like they actually had a chance.
That was like the high point
for
sure. That was one of the best wins they've. I mean, especially all the factors. They don't have Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and they win that game. Will they ever make it with him? If Aaron Rodgers is healthy for 17 games or 15 games, yes.
You still think he's going to be a very good quarterback if healthy?
I think he'll be better than what they've had, certainly. Like 75% of Aaron Rodgers is better than any quarterback the Jets have had in like a decade. So like
the one Fitz year is the only outlier.
And exactly. He just changes everything like we're talking about. Like he runs the offense and I believe in their ability to win with him. Like maybe they're not going to win 12 games. Maybe they go 9-8, but I think you can get into the playoffs with that these days.
Chef Kevin with a super chat. Zach, are you hearing anything about the Jets wanting an offensive line more than a receiver in this draft class? How likely is it for Joe Douglas to trade back to gain a second-round pick?
Yeah, it's so hard to predict that. It kind of just depends on how the free agency goes. Because if he's able to address the entire offensive line, hypothetically, in free agency and trades, and receiver, then they can just get the best player available. They can trade back. If they don't do that, like I get the feeling that it'll be offensive tackle, but like I don't know if Roma Duns, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, from Washington is like
Dunze.
Honestly, I haven't looked up how to say his name, and I will. Like if he's there at 10, like and the guy's a star, like I'd consider it, or Brock Bowers. Like I get all that stuff. You don't want to go into the draft like they did last year, where everybody knows what you need to the degree that like they're probably going to pick a tackle there. Let's trade above them.
What's the real story with that, real quick? Because the Jets in-house social media people and One Jets Tribe, they put up the video that made it appear like it was Will McDonald all along. He was their guy. From what you've been told, what's the validity of that?
I mean, everybody after the pick insisted that like Broderick Jones was not a guy that they necessarily wanted, and so that's all I've been able to hear. But like the Steelers at least thought that they wanted an offensive tackle, so they did it, and then the Jets. I think, Will McDonald might turn out to be a great player, but I think everybody agrees at this point that was the wrong choice. They didn't think these receivers are first-round picks. Ultimately, they didn't even necessarily need to pick an offensive lineman, and I think it's easy to talk about it like that because they traded up and got him because they thought the Jets were going to pick him, and it's easy for the Jets to say in retrospect, we didn't want him, and they can frame that video however they want. But ultimately, like, they still need offensive linemen, and they didn't pick one last year. So if Roger Jones is on the board and they didn't pick him, we'd be criticizing them even harder right now. So, they can't draft the defensive end in the first round. I'll say that much.
Speaking of which, I'll get you out of here with a couple quick hitters, Zach. Bryce Huff. Connor said yesterday on my show, Connor Hughes, that he heard from someone that the market for Bryce Huff might not be what everyone thinks it's going to be. He said he heard something in the $12 to $14 million a year range. Even if it's a little higher than that, I would be furious as a Jet fan if they don't keep him, if that's truly what his market ends up being. What are you hearing in regards to his price point and the chances the Jets could actually keep him?
I still feel like it's going to be higher than that. I could be wrong. I mean, Connor has good sources on that kind of stuff. I just think on paper, you just look at all the factors with him. Like, I don't see why he wouldn't get more than that. But 12 to 14, if that's what it is, and the Jets let him walk out the door, then absolutely everybody needs to destroy them. If it's more than that, I still think they deserve criticism because I mean, I'm sure you've talked about it a lot on here. I know Jets fans have been angry anytime any of us suggest that he might not return. But I think you also have to consider. Joe Douglas might want to re-sign him, but they also have an owner who might look at it like, why am I going to pay $16 million a year for a backup? Like, why would we do that? I mean, you saw his comments about Quinton Williams on Hard Knocks, where he's like, that's a lot of money that we paid him. So I think all those are kind of factors, and that's why I kind of lean towards him not returning. But if it's the 12 to 14, I think they would be down for that. And he's 25. He's a great pass rusher. If they're playing with more leads, he's going to play more than 40% of the snaps. Like, best case scenario for next year is Will McDonald becomes Bryce Huff, and maybe he's better down the line. But but you have Bryce Huff, so
right.
Like bring him back. Like I'm 100% in on they have to bring him back.
To be fair to Woody as well, I can't sit here and say Woody's ever really been cheap. Like he's always been willing to spend. Now we could question what the money's been spent on and who they've hired, obviously. But the one criticism of Woody that he's cheap, I don't think that's fair. So like. To me, the money shouldn't be a problem to keep Bryce up if that's what it ends up being, right?
Yeah, I mean you're right logically, but a lot of times this doesn't really go to logic. So
it's still the Jets, I get it.
But letting a guy that you developed like that leave the building is never a good practice, I would say.
Backup quarterback. Your thoughts on the names to watch and your prediction for who they ultimately sign?
Yeah, I mean I think the names everybody's been floating. Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, Ryan Tannehill are the three I have my eyes on. I think Tannehill. A lot of rumblings about him going to the Steelers because Arthur Smith is there. So I lean towards Brissett or Minshew, and they're probably going to give them a decent amount of money, probably one of the higher paid backup quarterbacks. I know the staff loves both of those guys. If I'm predicting right now, I'd say Brissett, but I could see Minshew being the backup quarterback for the Jets.
Ultimately, Jets are on the clock. Pick 10. Who are they taking, Zack Rosenblatt?
I'll say Fuaga from Oregon State. Right now, he just makes the most sense, and it's just like predicting the board is always impossible. But I did see we had a mock draft at the Athletic where it was our college football writers, and they had Joe Alt fall all the way to 10, which would obviously be the best case scenario. If he fell past 5, I would consider trading up for him because I think he's a plug and play left tackle. And somebody like Fuaga and the JC Latham, like those are more like right tackles, and they probably need a left tackle. So that would be best case. Or the Penn State kid, I think would be a great. If he can fall to 10, I think he'd be the pick. But yeah, I'm going to go Oregon State.
Is next year's one on the table in a trade scenario? Because that's the one thing I don't want to see the Jets do. They could trade next year's too if they had to. I get it. You're all in. But I got to hold my first round pick next year in case crap hits the fan, everyone's out, and you're going to need a quarterback next year.
I don't think they'd trade a future first, but it depends if they're trading up to go and get somebody or if they're trying to trade for like Justin Jefferson. I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't see a future first, but again, they're all in on this year. Everybody's on the hot seat. That's kind of when teams make rash decisions. And if it doesn't work this year, then the next GM and coach is screwed. Sure. But that's not Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh's problem. So
Knifey with a super chat at the buzzer here. Heard we're planning on meeting with Caleb Williams. Obviously not taking a quarterback in the first round, but do you see us drafting a project quarterback in a later round? Is that true? The Jets are going to meet with Caleb?
I did not see that. I mean, I don't think that's out of the ordinary. A lot of teams meet with these guys. You do your due diligence.
It's due diligence season, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Of course. Late round quarterback. I've been saying all offseason, I think they absolutely should. But I also could see Joe Douglas not doing that because if it doesn't work out next year, you're drafting that quarterback for the next guy. But I think it's good practice to just take a flyer on a quarterback on day 3 every year, maybe earlier if you love a guy. And if it works out, fine. If it doesn't, then you try again next year because, a potential good quarterback in the 6th round is more valuable than a special teams linebacker that may or may not ever play. So
100%.
Yeah.
He's Zack Rosenblatt. My name is Jake Asman. We're going to be live throughout the day. Joe Douglas will speak at noon Eastern time, so we'll have live reaction to what he says on the channel. Make sure you like this video that you're watching now. Subscribe as well. We're approaching 36,000 subscribers here on YouTube. Appreciate everyone for their support. Shout out to Roan Apparel. Make sure you guys use promo code Asman at checkout to get yourself 20% off. I'm rocking the Roan commuter button-down shirt right now that you can see on the screen. So shout out to Roan for making me look nice on camera here. Once again, Roan.com, promo code Asman. Comfortable clothing. They have something for everyone, every occasion. Button-down shirts, polo shirts, pants, you name it, they have it at Roan. Shout out to Roan for being part of our show. Zach, I'll get you out of here on this. What do you have cooking up on The Athletic this week and throughout the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, Joe Douglas will be talking today, so reactions to that. I think I'm going to write something soon about Zach Wilson and like the future for him. And we usually do like a what we heard at the combine kind of story, and so that'll be something to keep an eye out for.
Should I even ask you about Zach? Is it notable? Is he gone? Is the deal going to happen soon?
I've been of the mind that I think they find a team that will trade for him, but I'm open to the idea that maybe they have to just cut him and have no cap savings. I think that's a possibility. But that's the thing I'm kind of like trying to work to find out like what his market is if he has one kind of thing.
Looking forward to reading that in The Athletic. He's Zack Rosenblatt. My name is Jake Asman. Thank you for watching, Jet fans. We'll be back with more coverage on the channel throughout the day.